The groom hit the bride's daughter at the wedding. What happens next leaves everyone shocked. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button so you don't miss more incredible stories, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Evelyn Carter's life was a delicate balancing act, a constant juggle between career and motherhood. At 35, she had built a solid reputation in the marketing world, sharp-minded, resilient, and known for her ability to turn failing campaigns into success stories. Yet, beneath her professional confidence lay a quieter, softer world, one she had crafted with great care for her 10-year-old daughter, Sophie. Their two-bedroom apartment in the heart of Seattle wasn't large, but it was filled with warmth. The walls were adorned with Sophie's colorful drawings. The kitchen perpetually carried the scent of vanilla and cinnamon from Evelyn's weekend baking sessions, and the bookshelves overflowed with novels. Some Evelyn's, but most belonging to Sophie, whose love for reading far surpassed that of an average 10-year-old. The apartment was their sanctuary, a place untouched by the ghosts of Evelyn's past. That past, however, had left its mark. A painful divorce from Michael, a man who had once promised forever but had instead left scars, both visible and unseen, had hardened Evelyn's heart. She had long since traded dreams of romance for the practicalities of single parenthood. Love, she told herself, was an unnecessary risk, one she was unwilling to take. Her world revolved around Sophie, and that was enough. Sophie was a quiet child, introspective and perceptive beyond her years. She preferred the company of her sketchpad and books over large crowds, often retreating into the corners of their apartment, lost in the world of her imagination. She carried a little pink notebook with a heart-shaped lock, a journal where she poured her thoughts, though she never shared its contents with anyone, not even her mother. Evelyn respected that privacy, knowing Sophie's mind was a place of wonder, curiosity, and sometimes secrets too big for a child to carry alone. Evelyn's social life was minimal by choice. Beyond occasional brunches with her best friend, Danielle, she rarely stepped out for anything other than work or errands. Danielle, ever vibrant, ever opinionated, was the one person who refused to let Evelyn disappear entirely into her role as a mother. "You've spent years pouring everything into Sophie and your career," Danielle would say, exasperated yet affectionate. "You deserve something for yourself, too." Evelyn would always laugh it off. "Love's not on the menu, Danny. I've got a full plate as it is." Danielle would roll her eyes, but never push too hard. She knew Evelyn well enough to understand that some wounds, no matter how much time passed, never fully healed. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled through the chilly Seattle streets, Evelyn sat at the dining table, finishing up a work presentation, while Sophie lay on the couch, sketching in her notebook. The warm glow of the lamp cast soft shadows around them, a comforting presence in the otherwise quiet apartment. Sophie suddenly looked up. "Mom?" Evelyn glanced up from her laptop. "Yeah, sweetheart. Are you ever going to get married again?" The question caught Evelyn off guard. She set her laptop aside and gave Sophie her full attention. "Where's that coming from?" Sophie shrugged, her pencil hovering over the paper. "I don't know. Just wondering." Evelyn hesitated. "Marriage isn't really on my mind, honey. I have everything I need right here." Sophie nodded, but there was something unreadable in her expression. She tapped her pencil against the sketchpad, then went back to drawing. Evelyn exhaled softly, pushing the conversation from her mind. But later that night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Danielle had been right. 2 weeks later, Evelyn found herself standing in the middle of an art gallery, feeling distinctly out of place. The charity gala was something she had not planned on attending, but her boss had insisted. "Networking," he had said. "It's good for the company's image." And so, she had reluctantly agreed, slipping into a sleek navy blue dress and twisting her natural curls into a loose updo. The gallery was filled with polished smiles, expensive suits, and art pieces that felt cold despite their staggering price tags. She wandered from room to room, her champagne glass barely touched, counting the minutes until she could leave without being noticed. And then, a deep voice, smooth and laced with amusement, broke the monotonous hum of conversation around her. "Modern art," it mused. A celebration of confusion. Evelyn turned, her brows lifting. Beside her stood a tall man with neatly styled sandy blonde hair and a tailored charcoal suit. His striking blue eyes held a glint of mischief, and his smile, confident yet easy, carried the kind of charm that was both effortless and practiced. "You don't sound like a fan," she replied, a small, reluctant smile tugging at her lips. "Oh, I appreciate the effort," he said, his eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "But I've always been more drawn to things that tell a story, something with heart, not just brushstrokes." Evelyn tilted her head. "That's surprisingly sentimental for a man in a $1,000 suit." He laughed, a rich sound that cut through the stiffness of the event. "Guilty as charged. Andrew Bishop," he introduced himself, offering his hand. "Evelyn Carter." She took his hand, his grip firm yet warm. The conversation unfolded effortlessly from there. He was an entrepreneur, passionate about philanthropy and the arts. He listened to her, truly listened, with a kind of attentive curiosity that felt rare. When she mentioned Sophie, there was no flicker of hesitation, no shift in demeanor that she had come to expect from men who learned she had a child. Instead, he asked, "What's she like?" Evelyn found herself painting a picture of Sophie. Her love for reading, her clever observations, her sharp sense of humor. Andrew smiled warmly. "She sounds incredible. You must be proud." "I am," Evelyn admitted, and for the first time in a long time, her heart felt unexpectedly light. By the end of the evening, Andrew had asked if he could see her again. Against her usual instincts, against the careful walls she had built around herself, she said yes. And just like that, something in Evelyn Carter's carefully constructed world shifted. Something she wasn't sure she was ready for. But something that had already begun. Evelyn Carter had never been the kind of woman who believed in chance encounters. Yet here she was, standing in the dimly lit foyer of an upscale art gallery, questioning the very fabric of her carefully structured life. The buzz of polite conversation filled the air, accompanied by the occasional clink of champagne glasses. The scent of expensive cologne, mingled with the faint aroma of fresh paint from the newly displayed pieces, was almost suffocating. She had told herself she would only stay for an hour, long enough to be seen, to smile at the right people, to make an appearance that satisfied her boss's insistence on networking. But then, as she wandered past abstract paintings and impersonal sculptures, she met him. Andrew Bishop. Tall, confident, with an easy charm that made him stand out even in a room filled with the city's elite. His tailored charcoal suit fit him as though it had been crafted with only him in mind. His sandy blonde hair perfectly styled, yet just tousled enough to seem effortless. But it was his eyes, piercing blue with a spark of amusement, that caught her attention first. "Modern art," he mused, stepping beside her as she observed a particularly chaotic painting. A celebration of confusion. Evelyn turned slightly, arching a brow at the unexpected comment. "Not a fan, I take it?" He gave a slight smirk. "Oh, I appreciate the effort, but I've always been drawn to things that tell a story, something with heart, not just brushstrokes." Her lips quirked upward despite herself. "That's surprisingly sentimental for a man in a $1,000 suit." He chuckled, the sound rich and warm. "I contain multitudes." Evelyn found herself intrigued despite her usual reluctance. She had met plenty of men like Andrew before, polished, confident, charismatic, but there was something different about him. He wasn't just making small talk. He was genuinely engaging with her, reading between the lines of her guarded expressions. They moved through the gallery together, their conversation flowing effortlessly. She learned that he was an entrepreneur, deeply involved in philanthropy and the arts. Unlike most men she had met since her divorce, he didn't balk at the mention of her daughter. Instead, he asked about Sophie with genuine interest. "What's she like?" he asked, tilting his head slightly as they stopped in front of a moody, black-and-white photograph of a rain-soaked street. Evelyn hesitated for only a moment before answering. "She's smart, incredibly observant, loves books and drawing more than anything. She has this quiet way of seeing the world that always makes me stop and think." Andrew smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling slightly. "She sounds amazing. You must be proud." "I am," Evelyn admitted, the warmth in her voice undeniable. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't expected, lightness. As if, just for a moment, the weight of the past wasn't pressing so heavily on her shoulders. By the end of the evening, when Andrew asked if he could see her again, Evelyn surprised herself by saying yes. Their first official date took place the following weekend at a cozy Italian bistro nestled in a quiet corner of the city. The restaurant was dimly lit, the scent of garlic and fresh basil lingering in the air. The setting was intimate, designed for quiet conversations and lingering glances over candlelight. Evelyn, dressed in a deep green wrap dress that accentuated her curves without trying too hard, found herself more nervous than she had anticipated. Dating wasn't something she had actively pursued in years, and yet here she was, sitting across from Andrew, feeling something she wasn't sure she was ready for. Andrew, however, made it easy. He was charming without being overbearing, confident without arrogance. He listened more than he spoke, asking questions that showed he had been paying attention to everything she had said at the gallery. As the evening unfolded, Evelyn found herself laughing more than she had in a long time. When dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate soufflé dusted with powdered sugar, Andrew reached across the table, brushing his fingers lightly against hers. "I'd like to meet her," he said softly. "Sophie?" Evelyn's breath caught slightly. She had introduced Sophie to someone only once before, and the outcome had been disappointing. But there was something in Andrew's sincerity that made her believe he meant it. "Maybe," she said, her voice measured but not dismissive. "When the time is right." Andrew nodded, understanding. "Whenever you're ready." By the end of the night, as they stepped out into the crisp autumn air, Evelyn realized something startling. She wanted to see him again. And just like that, her carefully constructed world shifted once more. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of late-night phone calls, coffee shop meetups, and lingering conversations over dinner. Evelyn found herself slipping into something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement. She hadn't expected to find herself waiting for Andrew's texts, replaying their conversations in her mind, or catching herself smiling for no reason. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. Andrew had a way of making everything feel effortless. He was the kind of man who remembered the smallest details: how she liked her coffee, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought, the fact that she always carried a notebook in her bag to jot down ideas. His attentiveness was refreshing, almost intoxicating. But Sophie remained cautious. It wasn't that she disliked Andrew, she was simply indifferent. While Evelyn found herself caught up in the warmth of his charm, Sophie kept her distance. She would respond politely when spoken to, but there was no excitement, no curiosity, just quiet observation. One evening, Andrew came over for dinner. It was a chilly Friday night, the scent of baked chicken and rosemary filling the apartment. Evelyn had spent the afternoon making sure everything was perfect. The table set with her best plates, candles flickering softly against the dim lighting. Sophie sat at the far end of the table, her fork absently pushing peas around her plate as Andrew recounted a story about his travels in Italy. He had a way of telling stories that made people lean in, made them feel as if they were right there with him. Evelyn laughed at one of his anecdotes, reaching for her wine glass. "I can't believe you actually tried to convince an Italian grandmother to change her recipe." Andrew grinned. "I like to think she appreciated my enthusiasm." Sophie, however, remained quiet. Andrew turned his attention to her. "What about you, Sophie? Do you like Italian food?" Sophie glanced up, her fingers tightening slightly around her fork. "It's okay." Evelyn cleared her throat, sensing the tension. "She's a bit of a picky eater." Andrew chuckled. "Ah, I see. Well, I know a great little spot in town that makes the best spaghetti. Maybe we can all go sometime." Sophie didn't respond. Instead, she took a slow sip of her water, her eyes flicking between her mother and Andrew before returning to her plate. After dinner, as Evelyn washed the dishes, Andrew leaned against the counter, watching her with a relaxed expression. "She's a quiet one." "She's always been that way," Evelyn said, scrubbing a plate. "She likes to observe before she opens up to people." Andrew nodded, though something flickered behind his eyes. "I'll win her over. Just need to give her time." Evelyn smiled, wanting to believe him. The next few weeks saw Andrew becoming a steady presence in their lives. He would bring small gifts for Sophie: an art set, a book about famous painters, a keychain in the shape of a tiny cat, because Evelyn had once mentioned Sophie loved them. He made a point to ask about her interests, to include her in conversations. but Sophie remained distant. One Saturday afternoon, Andrew offered to take them both to a local fair. The air was crisp with autumn, the scent of caramel apples and popcorn filling the air. The fairgrounds were alive with laughter, flashing lights, and the rhythmic chime of carnival games. Evelyn held Sophie's hand as they walked through the booths, Andrew beside them. He pointed to a ring toss game. "Think you can beat me, Sophie?" Sophie gave a small shrug. "Maybe." Andrew grinned, stepping up to the counter and handing the booth attendant a few dollars. He threw the first ring. It missed. The second also missed. He huffed dramatically. "All right, your turn." Sophie took a ring, adjusting her grip slightly before tossing it. It landed neatly around the peg on the first try. Andrew let out an exaggerated gasp. "You hustled me." For the first time that day, Sophie smiled. Evelyn laughed, nudging Andrew playfully. "Looks like she's better than both of us." Andrew chuckled, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Later that evening, as they walked back to the car, Andrew offered to carry Sophie's stuffed animal prize. She hesitated before handing it over. As she climbed into the back seat, she mumbled, "Thank you." Andrew glanced at Evelyn, a triumphant glint in his eyes. "See? Progress." Evelyn wanted to believe it. Yet, despite Andrew's persistent kindness, Sophie's hesitance never fully faded. One evening, Evelyn came home to find Andrew sitting on the couch with Sophie. He had picked her up from school that day since Evelyn had been stuck in a late meeting. "Hey, you two," Evelyn greeted, setting her bag down. "How was school?" Sophie barely looked up. "Fine." Andrew ruffled her hair playfully. "She was quiet the whole ride home, but we're working on that, aren't we, kid?" Sophie tensed under his touch, and Evelyn noticed. It was small, barely perceptible, but there. A stiffness that hadn't been there before. That night, as Evelyn tucked Sophie into bed, she smoothed her daughter's hair. "You okay, sweetheart?" Sophie hesitated. "Yeah? You sure?" Sophie nodded, but Evelyn sensed something unspoken beneath the surface. As she closed the bedroom door, an unease settled in her chest. She wanted to believe Andrew was everything he seemed to be. He was patient, kind, invested. And yet, Sophie's reluctance nagged at her. Something wasn't quite right, and for the first time since meeting Andrew, Evelyn felt a sliver of doubt creep in. The drive to Andrew's lake house was quiet, with only the soft hum of the car engine and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. Autumn had fully settled in, painting the Pacific Northwest landscape in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. Evelyn, seated in the passenger seat, stole a glance at Sophie in the back. Her daughter sat with her sketchpad propped against her knees, her pencil moving idly but without purpose. Evelyn reached over, resting a gentle hand on Andrew's arm as he navigated the winding roads. "This is really generous of you," she said softly. Andrew smiled, his eyes flicking toward her briefly before returning to the road. "I want you both to be comfortable with me. Besides, I think a weekend away will do us all some good." Sophie didn't respond. Instead, she shifted slightly, her fingers tapping against the cover of her notebook. As they arrived, the lake house came into view, a stunning two-story retreat made of glass and cedar wood, overlooking the water. The modern design contrasted with the rustic surroundings, its sharp edges almost too perfect against nature's rough beauty. Andrew pulled into the gravel driveway and shut off the engine. "Welcome to paradise," he announced with a grin. Evelyn stepped out first, stretching her legs as the crisp lake air filled her lungs. "Wow," she breathed, taking in the expansive deck that wrapped around the house. "This is incredible." Sophie climbed out of the back seat, her eyes scanning the house with quiet curiosity. She clutched her sketchpad a little tighter. Andrew came around the car, draping an arm around Evelyn's waist as he pressed a kiss to her temple. "Come on, let's go inside." The interior was pristine, almost too pristine. Everything was arranged perfectly, from the sleek leather furniture to the untouched vases of fresh white flowers on the dining table. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive candles, but there was something almost clinical about it. No personal touches, no family photos, just a beautiful, curated space. Andrew led them upstairs, showing them to their rooms. Sophie's was a spacious guest room with a large bay window overlooking the lake. On the neatly made bed sat a new set of colored pencils and a fresh sketchpad. "I thought you might like these," Andrew said, standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets. Sophie hesitated before stepping inside. She picked up the sketch pad, running her fingers over the crisp pages. "Thank you," she said softly, her tone polite but distant. Evelyn gave Andrew a grateful smile. "That's really thoughtful." Andrew shrugged, grinning. "She's an artist. Artists need supplies." Sophie placed the sketch pad on the desk and sat down, opening it to the first page. But instead of drawing, she simply stared at the blank sheet, her pencil unmoving. Dinner that evening was warm, filled with laughter and the comforting scent of roasted chicken and rosemary. Andrew had cooked, insisting on making the meal himself. The dining area, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, offered a breathtaking view of the lake reflecting the setting sun. Evelyn sipped her wine, watching Andrew move effortlessly around the kitchen. He seemed completely in control. Every motion precise and intentional. It was impressive, yet something about his efficiency felt almost rehearsed. Sophie sat at the counter, doodling absent-mindedly as she picked at her food. As Evelyn reached for the salad bowl, Sophie's elbow knocked over her glass of water. The clear liquid spilled across the polished granite countertop, pooling near Andrew's phone. A sharp stillness filled the air. Andrew's voice cut through the warmth, firm but quiet. "Careful, Sophie." The girl froze, her fingers gripping the edge of her napkin. Evelyn quickly grabbed a towel. "It's just water, Andrew. No harm done." Andrew's lips curved into a smile as he met Evelyn's eyes. "Of course, just teaching a little mindfulness." He reached out and ruffled Sophie's curls lightly, but the girl's body remained tense under his touch. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Sophie appeared at Evelyn's bedroom door, her sketchpad hugged tightly to her chest. "Mom?" Evelyn sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sophie hesitated, shifting on her feet. "Can I sleep here with you?" Evelyn frowned slightly. Sophie hadn't asked to sleep in her bed in years. "Are you okay?" Sophie nodded quickly, but her eyes didn't meet her mother's. "The room feels too big. It's strange." Evelyn's heart softened. "Of course, baby. Come here." She lifted the covers and Sophie slid in beside her, curling up against her warmth. As the girl drifted off to sleep, Evelyn ran her fingers through Sophie's hair, a small seed of unease settling in her chest. Something felt off, but she couldn't quite place it. The following morning, Sophie was quiet, but otherwise normal. She ate breakfast in silence, her focus on her sketchpad. Andrew, as usual, was effortlessly charming, making coffee and chatting about plans for the day. A boat ride on the lake, a small hike, maybe even some fishing. As they made their way to the dock, Evelyn noticed Sophie lagging behind. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked, placing a hand on her daughter's back. Sophie nodded, but didn't look up. "Yeah." Andrew, already on the boat, called out, "Come on, you two. The water's perfect." Evelyn smiled, trying to shake off the lingering unease. "Let's go have some fun." Sophie followed, but as they stepped onto the boat, Evelyn caught a glimpse of something in her daughter's eyes. A hesitation, fleeting but unmistakable, and it stayed with her long after the boat pulled away from the shore. The weeks after their trip to the lake house passed in a comfortable rhythm. Andrew continued to be a steady presence in Evelyn's life, effortlessly integrating himself into her world. He picked her up from work, surprised her with dinner reservations, and even helped Sophie with her school projects when Evelyn had late meetings. On the surface, things were seamless, almost too perfect. But Sophie remained distant. Evelyn noticed the subtle ways her daughter's demeanor shifted whenever Andrew was around. She withdrew slightly, her words fewer, her movements more cautious. It wasn't obvious, at least, not to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But Evelyn had always been in tune with her daughter's emotions, and something didn't sit right. Still, she convinced herself that Sophie just needed time. Adjusting to change was hard for kids, and Andrew was trying. That had to count for something. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a crisp autumn evening, the city's skyline glowing against the inky night. Andrew had planned the evening meticulously. Dinner at a rooftop restaurant, a secluded table with a breathtaking view, and soft jazz playing in the background. Everything was designed to be perfect, just like Andrew always was. Evelyn felt beautiful in a deep red dress that hugged her figure, her hair cascading in loose waves. She sipped her wine, letting herself enjoy the warmth of the evening, the easy conversation, the way Andrew's eyes never strayed from hers. "You've been working so hard lately," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I thought you deserved a night where you didn't have to be anything but yourself. Evelyn smiled, feeling a flicker of something dangerous. Hope. You mean not a mother, a career woman, and a problem solver all at once? Andrew chuckled. Exactly. Just Evelyn. Beautiful, brilliant Evelyn. Her heart warmed at his words, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness. Then dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé dusted with powdered sugar. But Andrew wasn't focused on the dessert. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it gently on the table. Evelyn's breath hitched. Evelyn, Andrew said, his voice softer now, more measured. I've been thinking about this for a long time. About us. About you, me, and Sophie. Her pulse quickened. He flipped open the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. Classic, timeless, perfect, just like everything about him. Will you marry me? For a moment, everything around her seemed to pause. The distant hum of conversation blurred. The clinking of glasses faded. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Evelyn glanced at the ring, then at Andrew, at the hopeful anticipation in his eyes. She saw the reflection of the life they could have together, a stable, secure future, a partnership, a father figure for Sophie. Her lips parted, and though a sliver of doubt whispered in the back of her mind, she silenced it. Yes. Andrew's face broke into a wide, elated smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The restaurant erupted in applause, but Evelyn barely noticed. Her mind raced with the enormity of the decision she had just made. Later that night, as they walked back to the car, Andrew kept her hand in his thumb tracing slow circles over her skin. I can't wait to start this next chapter with you. Evelyn squeezed his hand, forcing herself to push away the lingering unease. Me too. The next morning, Evelyn sat Sophie down on the couch, her fingers brushing gently over her daughter's curls. She took a deep breath, trying to infuse her voice with excitement. Sweetheart, I have some big news. Sophie looked up from her sketchpad, her brown eyes unreadable. What is it? Evelyn hesitated for only a second before smiling. Andrew asked me to marry him. A long pause. And you said yes? Sophie's voice was quiet, measured. Evelyn nodded. Yes, honey. We're going to be a family. Sophie's fingers tightened around the edge of her notebook. So he's going to live with us? After the wedding? Yes. Evelyn tried to gauge her daughter's reaction, but Sophie's face remained carefully blank. For a moment, it seemed like she might say something else, but then she simply whispered, Okay, just that. Nothing more. The hollow emptiness in Sophie's voice sent a pang through Evelyn's chest. Sophie, are you okay with this? Another pause. Then Sophie nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. But Evelyn wasn't convinced. She reached for Sophie's hand, but her daughter pulled away, standing up abruptly. I think I'm going to go draw for a bit. And with that, she disappeared into her room, closing the door softly behind her. Evelyn sat there, staring at the empty space Sophie had left behind, a knot forming in her stomach. For the first time since saying yes to Andrew, doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. The afternoon sun filtered through the cafe windows, casting golden streaks across the wooden table where Evelyn sat, stirring her cappuccino absentmindedly. Across from her, Nicole watched with arms crossed, her lips pressed together in a firm line. You said yes, Nicole finally said, her tone unreadable. Evelyn sighed, setting her spoon down with a soft clink against the ceramic cup. I did. Nicole leaned forward, her sharp green eyes searching Evelyn's face. And you're happy? Evelyn hesitated. It was the kind of hesitation that told Nicole everything she needed to know. I want to be, Evelyn admitted. Andrew is perfect in so many ways. He's stable, thoughtful, generous. Nicole's fingers tapped against the table. And yet you sound like you're trying to convince yourself. Evelyn exhaled, rubbing her temple. It's Sophie, she admitted. She's not happy about it. Evelyn nodded. She's polite. She doesn't say anything outright, but I can feel it, Nicole. She's pulling away. Nicole leaned back in her chair, folding her arms again. Eve, you know kids have a sixth sense about people, right? Evelyn shot her a look. She's just adjusting. She's never had to share me before. Or, Nicole countered, tilting her head, she's sensing something you don't want to see. Evelyn frowned, her stomach twisting. You've never liked him. Nicole sighed. I don't dislike him, Eve. I just don't trust him. He's too polished. Evelyn bristled. So because he's well put together, that's a red flag? No, Nicole said, her voice softer now. "But because every time I see him it feels like he's performing, like everything he says and does is measured." Evelyn ran a hand through her hair. "That's not fair." Nicole studied her for a long moment before sighing. "Look, I know you want this to work, but just promise me something." "What?" "Pay attention, not just to Andrew but to Sophie. If she's uncomfortable, don't ignore it." Evelyn swallowed hard. "I would never ignore her." Nicole nodded. "Then prove it." That night, Evelyn curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over her lap as she stared at the engagement ring on her finger. It was beautiful, flawless, just like everything about Andrew. But Nicole's words clung to her, an unwelcome whisper in the back of her mind. She glanced at Sophie, who sat on the floor by the coffee table, sketching quietly. "Sophie?" Evelyn called gently. Sophie paused, but didn't look up. "Yeah? Are you really okay with all of this?" A beat of silence. Then Sophie shrugged. "I guess," Evelyn frowned. "Sweetheart, if something's bothering you, you can tell me." Sophie's fingers tightened around her pencil. "I just like it when it's just us." Evelyn's heart clenched. "Baby, you know, no matter what, it'll always be you and me, right?" Sophie's lips pressed together, then she nodded. "Yeah," but Evelyn wasn't sure if she believed her. The next few weeks passed with a growing sense of unease that Evelyn couldn't shake. Andrew was still as charming and attentive as ever, but Sophie's distance became more pronounced. She spoke less, spent more time in her room, and barely engaged with Andrew, no matter how hard he tried. One evening, during dinner at Andrew's condo, the tension reached a breaking point. The table was set with an elaborate spread: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, fresh bread. Andrew had outdone himself as always. Sophie sat across from him, silent as she picked at her food. Then as she reached for her glass of water, her fingers slipped, and the glass tipped over, spilling across the table. Andrew's expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. "Careful, Sophie," he said, his tone smooth but carrying an edge. Sophie stiffened, her shoulders drawing up slightly. "Sorry." Evelyn quickly grabbed a napkin, dabbing at the water. "It's fine, Andrew. It was just an accident." Andrew smiled, but it was tight. "Of course, just teaching a little responsibility." Sophie didn't say another word for the rest of the meal. Later that night, as Evelyn tucked Sophie into bed, she brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "do you like spending time with Andrew?" Sophie hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "He's nice." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "But?" Sophie's fingers twisted in the edge of her blanket. "He looks at me like I'm in the way." The words settled deep in Evelyn's chest, heavy and unmoving. She forced a smile, pressing a kiss to Sophie's forehead. "You'll always be my number one, okay?" Sophie nodded, but Evelyn could see the doubt lingering in her daughter's eyes. As she turned off the light and left the room, Nicole's warning echoed in her mind. Maybe Sophie wasn't the only one sensing something was wrong. The weeks leading up to the wedding became a whirlwind of fittings, venue visits, and endless to-do lists. Evelyn found herself drowning in decisions, floral arrangements, seating charts, cake flavors, all while juggling her job and motherhood. Andrew, ever the perfectionist, took the lead in the planning, ensuring every detail met his high standards. At first, Evelyn found it reassuring. Andrew was a natural organizer, and his confidence made everything seem under control. But soon, his decisiveness began to feel like something else entirely: control. It started small. When Evelyn suggested a small, intimate ceremony, Andrew had smoothly convinced her otherwise. "This is a celebration of us," he had said, brushing a thumb on her cheek. "We deserve something grand, something unforgettable." She had nodded, not wanting to argue. After all, it was just a wedding. What mattered was their future together, not the size of the guest list. But then, there were other things. When Evelyn mentioned wanting Sophie to have a special role in the wedding, perhaps as a flower girl or giving a reading, Andrew hesitated. "She's shy," he said. "Let's not put too much pressure on her." Evelyn frowned. "She's my daughter, Andrew. I want her to feel included." Andrew's smile was soft, but there was something calculated behind it. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll figure something out." Yet nothing was ever figured out. The plans moved forward, but Sophie remained on the sidelines. The distance between Sophie and Andrew only grew more pronounced. It wasn't just that she was quiet around him, there was a stiffness in her presence, a carefulness in the way she responded to his questions. One evening, as Evelyn sat in bed reviewing guest lists, Sophie appeared in the doorway, her journal hugged tightly to her chest. "Mom?" she asked hesitantly. Evelyn set her papers aside. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sophie hesitated, shifting her weight. "Do I have to do anything at the wedding?" Evelyn's heart softened. "No, baby, you don't have to if you don't want to." Sophie exhaled, relief flickering in her eyes. "Good, I don't want to." Evelyn frowned. "Why not?" Sophie hesitated, then mumbled, "I just don't." Evelyn wanted to press further, but something in her daughter's posture, tense, guarded, made her stop. Instead, she pulled Sophie onto the bed, wrapping an arm around her. "You know you can talk to me, right?" Sophie nodded, but she didn't say another word. The final dress fitting should have been a joyful moment. The bridal boutique was serene, filled with the soft hum of classical music and the faint scent of lavender candles. Evelyn stood before a full-length mirror, the ivory lace hugging her frame perfectly. She turned to Sophie, who sat on a small velvet chair, her sketchpad resting on her lap. "What do you think, sweetheart?" Sophie glanced up, offering a small smile. "You look pretty, Mom." Before Evelyn could respond, Andrew's voice broke through the delicate atmosphere. "Sophie," he said, his tone smooth but firm. "Sit up straight, sweetheart, you're slouching." Sophie immediately straightened, her fingers tightening around her sketchpad. Evelyn's eyes flicked between them, something unsettled stirring in her chest. "Andrew, it's just a dress fitting. She's fine." Andrew's smile was quick, practiced. "Of course, just teaching a little posture." Sophie didn't say anything. She just looked back down at her sketchpad, shoulders rigid. That night, as Evelyn tucked Sophie into bed, she hesitated at the doorway. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "do you like Andrew?" Sophie's fingers twisted in her blanket. Then, after a long silence, she said, "He's nice." Evelyn frowned. "But—" Sophie swallowed. "I like it when it's just us." Evelyn's breath caught. "Baby, you know that won't change, right? It'll always be you and me." Sophie nodded, but she didn't look convinced. And for the first time since the engagement, Evelyn felt something crack inside her. A whisper of doubt she couldn't ignore. The wedding day arrived bathed in golden sunlight, the early autumn air crisp yet pleasant. The ceremony was set in an elegant garden estate, with pristine white chairs arranged in neat rows and cascading floral arrangements adorning the altar. Everything was picture perfect, just as Andrew had planned. Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, smoothing down the intricate lace of her gown. The reflection staring back at her looked radiant, poised, and every bit the bride she had envisioned herself to be. And yet, beneath the surface, her chest felt tight with an unshakable sense of unease. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Sophie peeked in, her small frame dwarfed by the oversized black dress she wore as part of the wedding party. Her brown eyes held something unreadable. "You look like a queen, Mom," she said softly. Evelyn smiled and knelt down to her daughter's level, reaching for her hands. "And you look beautiful too, sweetheart." Sophie hesitated before speaking. "Do we have to live with him?" The question was so small, so fragile, yet it cut through Evelyn's heart like a blade. She swallowed, forcing herself to answer. "It's going to be good for us. For you. You'll have your own room, and Andrew, he wants to take care of us." Sophie's fingers twisted in her dress. "I don't want him to be my dad." A lump formed in Evelyn's throat, but before she could respond, there was another knock, this one firm, controlled. The wedding coordinator's voice filtered through the door. "5 minutes, Mrs. Carter." Evelyn pressed a kiss to Sophie's forehead, whispering, "We'll talk later, okay?" Sophie nodded, but the worry in her eyes didn't fade. The ceremony unfolded like a dream sequence, each moment slipping past in a blur. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, and as Andrew leaned in for the ceremonial kiss, Evelyn felt the weight of her commitment settle over her shoulders. The applause swelled, and for a fleeting moment, she let herself believe that everything would be okay. The reception was a lavish affair, held in a grand ballroom, adorned with crystal chandeliers and soft candlelight. Guests laughed, clinked glasses, and danced to the soft melody of a live string quartet. Andrew was the perfect groom, charming, attentive, and effortlessly composed. But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to snap. And then it did. Across the ballroom, Sophie reached for a dessert plate, her small hands careful but not quite steady enough. The plate slipped from her grasp, shattering against the marble floor with a sharp crack. The room fell into an eerie silence. Conversations halted, eyes turned. Andrew's voice sliced through the quiet, low and controlled, but carrying an unmistakable sharpness. "Sophie." She froze. Andrew took a step forward, his jaw tightening. "How many times have I told you be careful?" Evelyn's heart pounded as she instinctively stepped toward her daughter, but before she could reach her, a sound. Sharp, sudden, the unmistakable crack of a palm meeting soft skin. Sophie stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and something else, something deeper, rawer, fear. The world around Evelyn fractured in an instant. The ballroom, the guests, the music, it all faded into a distant hum. All she could see was Sophie's face, the red bloom of a handprint rising on her pale skin, the way her small shoulders trembled. Rage ignited in Evelyn's veins, hotter and more potent than anything she had ever felt before. She moved before she even realized it, her heels clicking against the floor with a force that cut through the stunned silence. In a single motion, she reached Sophie, her hands cupping her daughter's face, her voice shaking but firm. "You," she said, turning toward Andrew. Her voice like steel wrapped in fire. "You hit my child." Andrew's face shifted, first to surprise, then irritation, then something colder. She was being careless. She needs discipline. A hush fell over the room, the weight of his words hanging thick in the air. Evelyn's hands curled into fists. "No, she needs protection, and she sure as hell doesn't need you." Andrew's expression darkened. "Evelyn, don't." But she was already stepping back, pulling Sophie into her arms, holding her daughter close. "We're done." She turned, the fabric of her wedding dress dragging across the floor as she strode toward the exit, the gasps and murmurs of the guests barely registering in her mind. She didn't care. Sophie buried her face against Evelyn's shoulder, her small body shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Evelyn's chest tightened. "No, baby, you did nothing wrong." A voice behind her, Andrew's, sharp and low. "Evelyn, if you walk out that door, you'll regret it." She stopped just long enough to glance over her shoulder, her eyes burning. "The only thing I regret is not seeing you for what you really are sooner." Then she walked out, leaving behind the shattered illusion of a perfect life. As they stepped into the cool night air, Evelyn took a deep breath, holding Sophie close. The wind carried away the echoes of the ballroom, the weight of expectation, the years of ignoring her instincts. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. The night air was sharp and cold as Evelyn pushed through the towering iron gates of the estate, her heart pounding against her ribs. The muffled sounds of the wedding reception faded behind her, replaced by the rhythmic click of her heels against the pavement. Her wedding dress, once pristine and perfect, dragged through the damp gravel. But she didn't care. All that mattered was the warmth of Sophie's trembling body pressed against her chest, her daughter's uneven breaths hitching between silent sobs. They stopped beneath an old oak tree, its branches casting long, webbed shadows under the soft glow of the distant garden lights. Evelyn knelt, gathering Sophie's face in her hands, her fingers trembling as they traced the faint red mark left by Andrew's slap. Her voice, thick and raw, broke the silence. "Are you okay, baby?" Sophie hesitated, her lower lip quivering. "It just stings a little." Evelyn's chest cracked open. She wrapped Sophie in her arms, holding her so tightly she could feel the small, shuddering breaths against her skin. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have seen this sooner. I should have protected you." Sophie pressed her face against Evelyn's shoulder. "I didn't mean to make him mad." Evelyn froze. A wave of white-hot rage surged through her veins. She pulled back just enough to look into her daughter's tear-streaked face, her own voice trembling but firm. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. Do you hear me?" She cupped Sophie's cheeks, her thumbs brushing away fresh tears. "He had no right. No right." A sound behind them, a soft scuff of footsteps on pavement, made Evelyn's body snap tight. She turned sharply, instinctively drawing Sophie closer. Her pulse roared in her ears as a figure emerged from the darkness. Nicole. Her best friend's face was pale and tight with horror. Her heels clicked quickly against the pavement as she rushed toward them. "Evelyn," Nicole's voice was raw, her eyes locked on Sophie's cheek. "Oh my God." Evelyn's throat closed, her voice barely holding together. "He hit her, Nicole." Nicole's expression darkened, her usual warmth replaced by something cold and sharp. "Where is he?" Evelyn shook her head. "It doesn't matter. We're leaving." Nicole crouched beside Sophie, her voice gentle but laced with restrained fury. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Sophie nodded but didn't speak. Nicole's jaw clenched. She stood swiftly, gripping Evelyn's arm. "My car's out front. Let's go." Evelyn nodded, gripping Sophie's hand tightly as they followed Nicole through the empty driveway. The car sat idling under a street lamp, its headlights casting long streaks across the pavement. A voice, too familiar, too close, cut through the cold night air. "Evelyn?" Her blood turned to ice. She stopped, shielding Sophie instinctively as she turned to face Andrew. He stood several feet away, his tuxedo still crisp, but his eyes burned with something dark and furious beneath his carefully controlled mask. "Don't walk away from me," he said, his voice low and edged with quiet menace. Evelyn's body went rigid, every muscle coiled tight. She felt Sophie tense beside her, the small tremor returning to her daughter's frame. Nicole stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like steel. "You've done enough." Andrew's gaze flicked to Nicole, irritation flashing across his face. "This isn't your business." Evelyn lifted her chin, her voice low but unwavering. "She's my child. That makes it her business." Andrew took a step forward, his voice dropping into something dangerously smooth. "She needs discipline, Evelyn. You coddle her. That's why she's soft." The words landed, but not the way he intended. They landed like fuel on fire. Evelyn felt something inside her snap, her voice rising with a force she didn't know she possessed. "No. You don't get to decide what my daughter needs. You don't get to define her, and you sure as hell don't get to touch her." Her voice fractured, raw and burning, but her eyes were sharp and unyielding. "You think strength is cruelty. You think control is power, but you're nothing. You're a man who hurts children and calls it teaching." Her voice sharpened, each word a blade. "And you will never see her again." Andrew's face twisted into something dark, his control cracking at the edges. "You're overreacting." Nicole scoffed, stepping between them. "The only thing ruined here is your mask, Andrew." Evelyn's voice cut through again, firm and final. "I see you now, and I should have seen you sooner. But now you have no power over me." Andrew's jaw clenched. "You'll regret this." Evelyn's voice was cold and certain. "The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner." Nicole's hand was on her arm, guiding her firmly toward the car. Evelyn didn't look back. She heard Andrew's voice, sharp, desperate, but it was just noise. The only thing she felt was Sophie's heartbeat against her own, the warmth of her daughter's small fingers clutching hers as they slipped into the back seat. As Nicole pulled away from the estate, the world outside blurred in streaks of light and shadow. The adrenaline, the rage, the fear, it all began to crash in waves, and Evelyn's body shook from the aftershock. Sophie's small voice, barely above a whisper, broke the silence. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" Evelyn tightened her grip around her daughter's hand, her voice thick but unwavering. "Yes, baby, we are." She felt Sophie's fingers squeeze hers, and in that small gesture, in that fragile trust, Evelyn felt something unshatter. A bond forged in fire. Unbreakable. They were free. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Evelyn's apartment, casting soft golden hues across the living room. The space, though modest, felt warmer than it had in months. Perhaps because, for the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn could breathe. Sophie was curled up on the couch, still in her pajamas, her sketchbook resting on her lap. She wasn't drawing, just running her fingers absently over the cover. The faint scent of cinnamon lingered in the air from the pancakes Evelyn had made earlier, a quiet attempt at restoring some sense of normalcy. Evelyn sat beside her daughter, watching her closely. Sophie had been quiet since last night, not withdrawn but processing. "Sweetheart," Evelyn said softly, "how are you feeling?" Sophie exhaled, her small shoulders rising and falling. "Better," she whispered. Evelyn reached out, brushing a curl from Sophie's cheek. The faint outline of the bruise on her daughter's skin sent another wave of anger coursing through her veins, but she swallowed it down. Now wasn't the time for rage. Now was the time for healing. A knock at the door startled them both. Evelyn rose, her heart giving a nervous flutter before she reminded herself that Andrew couldn't touch them anymore. The restraining order had been filed. There was no way he could come near them without facing immediate consequences. Still, She checked the peephole before opening the door. Nicole stood on the other side, holding a to-go tray of coffees and a brown paper bag that smelled like fresh bagels. "I come bearing gifts," she announced, stepping inside. Sophie sat up slightly, offering a small but genuine smile. "Hi, Aunt Nicole." Nicole set the coffee on the table, then knelt in front of Sophie. "Hey, kiddo, how you doing?" Sophie hesitated, then answered with a quiet but sure, "Okay." Nicole smiled, brushing a reassuring hand over Sophie's hair before turning to Evelyn. "And you?" Evelyn sighed. "I don't know. Relieved, exhausted, angry." Nicole nodded. "That sounds about right." She sat on the couch, handing Evelyn a cup. "So what's the plan?" Evelyn wrapped her hands around the warm coffee, letting the heat seep into her fingers. "I met with the lawyer this morning. The restraining order is officially in place, and we're pushing for full legal protection." Nicole's expression darkened. "Good. He doesn't get to come near either of you ever again." Evelyn nodded. "Anna, our lawyer, says we have a strong case. There's video footage from the wedding, witness statements. He won't be able to spin this." Nicole exhaled. "That's something at least." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, comfortable yet heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally, Nicole reached into the bag, pulling out a bagel. "Okay, serious talk aside, I say we do something normal today. Something fun. What do you guys think?" Sophie tilted her head. "Like what?" Nicole grinned. "Like, I don't know, a movie marathon? Junk food? Zero responsibilities?" A ghost of excitement flickered across Sophie's face. "Can we watch old cartoons?" "Absolutely," Nicole said. "And I fully expect you to explain every character and storyline to me in excruciating detail." Sophie giggled, the sound light and free. Evelyn felt something in her chest loosen at the sound. As the afternoon stretched on, the three of them curled up on the couch, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by bowls of popcorn and candy. The television played reruns of Sophie's favorite animated series, and for the first time in weeks, the tension in the apartment lifted. Evelyn stole glances at her daughter, watching as Sophie slowly let herself relax, let herself laugh, let herself be a child again. It was a long road ahead. Healing always was, but they were taking their first steps. Halfway through their third movie, Evelyn's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She hesitated before picking it up, her breath catching when she saw the message from Anna. "The court granted the full protective order. He legally can't contact you or Sophie. Ever." Evelyn stared at the words, rereading them, letting them sink in. It was over. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly before looking over at Sophie. "Sweetheart?" Sophie paused the movie. "Yeah?" Evelyn hesitated for only a second before smiling. "He's gone. He can't come near us again." Sophie didn't say anything right away. Then slowly she reached for Evelyn's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We're really safe now?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, baby, we are." Sophie's lips parted in a soft, relieved breath. Then, for the first time in a long while, she leaned into her mother's embrace, resting her head against Evelyn's shoulder. Nicole wiped at her eyes dramatically. "All right, well, now that we've had our emotional moment, I vote we order pizza." Sophie giggled. "With extra cheese?" "Obviously." As Nicole grabbed her phone to place the order, Evelyn pressed a kiss into Sophie's hair, holding her close. They had won, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt like theirs again. Thanks for watching. If you loved this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more great stories like this one. Tell us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this video with your friends and family so they can enjoy it too. There's plenty more amazing stories waiting for you, so stick around and keep exploring. See you in the next videos.